All right, everybody, I'm back. Good to be back. Thank you again, partners, manscaped.com. Use promo code Torres. And as I said, fellas, that body wash, whew, unbelievable. Can't even keep my hands off myself. But that's neither here nor there. Let's switch gears. Let's talk a little college hoops. Because I will say, just in general, I do think it was a little bit of a slower weekend in college basketball. I think college basketball in general kind of gets, hey, these two middle Saturdays in January, the NFL is going to own this. Let's not put a ton of marquee games late in the day. Let's get a few games in early. Let's get out of there. We're not beating the NFL head-to-head. And let's own late January, early February, March, and April. So there weren't a ton of games, and I don't think there was a ton of huge mega headlines to come out of Saturday, but I do think there were two really important ones, both ironically coming from the state of Kentucky, and let's talk about the two of them. One really positive, one really negative. Then we'll wrap on some of the other headlines from the weekend, including that Arkansas upset at LSU without Coach Muss, who's he's out with shoulder surgery. We'll talk a little bit about Kansas, who played really, really well, on and on and on. But like I said, I thought there were two marquee stories that came out of Saturday, college basketball, both from the state of Kentucky, one positive, one negative. And since I'm a glasses half full guy, let's start with the positive. Positive vibes only on this show until we talk about Louisville 5 minutes from now. But the positive is I don't think there was a single more positive the entire weekend in college basketball, unless you're a UT fan, than what happened at Rupp Arena. Kentucky comes in as a 4.5-point favorite against the Tennessee Volunteers. Final score, 107-79. Kentucky puts that butt whooping on Tennessee. The Tennessee Volunteers, the only thing Tennessee was volunteering for was a butt whooping on Saturday. It was really bad. And what I would say is a couple things. Look, first of all, I'm poking at Tennessee. What I would say is Tennessee, there was nothing you could do. I mean, Kentucky spent part of this game, most of this game, shooting around 80% from the field. They could not miss. And I do understand that in the big picture, there is probably not going to be another team that shoots that well over the course of this entire season than Kentucky did for about a 32-minute stretch on Saturday. And the Tennessee fans, you just got to lick your wounds, get out of Rupp, and get home because there is nothing you could do. Kentucky was just absolutely awesome on Saturday. What I would also say, though, is I do think that this game in many ways confirmed what I've been saying for a few weeks. And what I've been saying for a few weeks is this, is that I can never remember. I've been kind of in this media space basically since John Calipari got to Kentucky early, 2009, 2010, whatever. I've been in this media space, and this year is the first time that I believe that Kentucky entered the month of January underrated, underappreciated nationally, under-talked about nationally, and I think that's continued over the last few weeks. And now part of the reason that Kentucky remains underrated, underappreciated, they really didn't have that signature win. And I get it, right? We can't put them up there with Auburn, which is 9-1 in quad one games. We can't put them up there with Arizona, which won at Illinois. We can't put them up there with Duke, which has 2 or 3 good wins, until they start racking up those marquee wins. And they're certainly going to have those marquee opportunities over the next few weeks, starting with Tennessee on Saturday. They play at Auburn next weekend. They play Kansas in the ACC Big 12 Challenge, or the SEC Big 12 Challenge in a few weeks. They're going to play LSU. They're going to play Arkansas. They're going to play Alabama. And so they're going to have plenty of opportunities to show everyone just how good they are. I would say I also think part of the reason that people think people don't understand how good they are is because they don't have that marquee win, so it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing. Well, they're not very good because they don't have a marquee win. Well, actually, they are really good. They just don't have the marquee win to back it up. And so I think Saturday helped prove that this Kentucky team's probably better than I think a lot of people realize. And I said it on Twitter, and I stand by it on Saturday afternoon. This is the first time in my career that Kentucky in the John Calipari era is underrated coming into January. And I would also say they were ranked number 18 in the most recent AP poll. And if there are 17 teams in college basketball better than the team that put up 107 on Tennessee on Saturday, then this is the best season in the history of college basketball. Bottom line is there aren't 17 better teams, and when you start to talk about teams that down the stretch could be peaking in March, could have the opportunity to be playing in New Orleans for a national championship, I think Kentucky's right up there with anybody, whether it's Arizona, Auburn, Duke, whomever. There's a lot of teams at the top of college basketball this year. I don't believe there's 1 or 2 great ones. I do think that Kentucky is one of the 10, 12, 15 that could be playing for a title come early April. With that said, though, I kind of want to talk about this in the bigger picture because I did think of something very interesting as I was watching that Kentucky game on Saturday, And it really dates back to last year. And I don't want to overdo it. And I don't want to go back through everything that went wrong last season at Kentucky. But we all remember that Kentucky was historically bad last year. We all remember that we were referencing the Basil Hayden era at Kentucky back in the 19-teens, as last year was the worst season in Kentucky basketball history since the Basil Hayden era of the 19-teens, as Kentucky finished 9-16 overall. So why do I bring it up? It is because I had a thought on Saturday. I think it's unique. I think it's interesting. I don't think anybody else is talking about it, and I think it's this, is that there are so many times in college basketball, in college football, in college sports in general, where folks in the media kind of just sit back and say, those crazy college sports fans, those crazy college football fans, those crazy college basketball fans, they're crazy. They don't know what's going on. They're out of touch. They're delusional. College sports fans get painted in a certain picture as crazy, delusional, unrealistic, whatever. And I do think there is a negative connotation to that idea, and I do think that at times that connotation is correct. What I don't think people talk enough about, though, is this, is the idea that the craziness of college sports fans sometimes has a positive effect. And I think Kentucky basketball is the example of a positive, because this time last year, into February, into March, Kentucky fans drew a line in the sand. Kentucky fans said, this is not good enough. This is not acceptable for one of the best programs in the history of college basketball. And John Calipari, you better figure it out, because if you don't figure it out, you ain't going to be the head coach here very much longer. And so I bring it up to say that we only talk about the negative effects of fans on college sports, but I actually think this is a positive, because as Kentucky enters the second half of the year as I believe one of the most underrated teams in the country and good enough to win a national championship, I think it is a direct reflection of the pressure that these Kentucky fans put on John Calipari last offseason. John Calipari, to his credit, responding to those fans. And now what we see is exactly what we saw in Rupp Arena on Saturday, a team that is really deep, really talented, and good enough to win it all. And when I look at it in the bigger picture, again, it goes back to what I just said a minute ago. The coverage of most college sports relative to the fans is negative. In other words, it's a bunch of people that don't cover college sports, that don't watch on a day-in, day-out basis, that don't know the nuance of all this. They're always critical of college sports fans, right? I'll give you a few examples just to kind of contextualize all this. First of all, just look at how Coach O was covered a few weeks ago when he got fired at LSU. As soon as he gets fired, it immediately becomes, this guy just won a national championship 2 years ago. How could you possibly get rid of him? And then it's like, oh, wait, a couple things. One, there's the old win-loss record. Can't lose to Mississippi State at home if you're LSU. Can't lose to UCLA. Can't lose to Kentucky. You know, he was losing games he shouldn't lose. There's personal stuff going on that's bleeding into the football program, and we don't know exactly what's true and exactly what's not, and so I'm not going to speculate on rumors. But then beyond that, you could see that the foundation of the entire program was cracked. When you win a national championship in 2019 and you overhaul your staff completely twice in 2 years, it means that there's something wrong. But the way that Coach O was covered was mostly a shame on LSU fans, feel bad for Coach O. It's like, yeah, feel bad for the dude that's making $20 million a year to not coach football next year. Oh, by the way, it was the same with Dan Mullen at Florida. He just won the SEC East last year. Yeah, and they've basically lost every game since then that matters. And on top of that, the recruiting is plummeting. And yeah, you can bring back Dan Mullen and give him another 2 or 3 years, but there's no real reason to think that he's going to overhaul it. And I thought it was kind of the same with Kentucky basketball at this time last year. When Kentucky's struggling, everyone immediately goes to, oh, it's COVID, oh, it's this, oh, it's that, unnormal offseason. And while I certainly think that played a role, I also think that there were some structural things within the Kentucky program that were starting to get sloppy, lazy, whatever. And John Calipari, as the head of the program, is the face of the program. He's responsible for that. He's responsible for how his teams are put together, how they play, his coaches on the coaching staff. And so when Kentucky fans got frustrated last year and they drew a line in the sand and they said enough is enough, Coach Cal, I give them credit for doing that. I don't think it was a negative, and I think it was a positive in a lot of ways, because they said, look, Coach Cal, we love you. We love everything you've done for this program. But at the same time, let's also not forget you are the highest paid coach in college basketball, and you're not allowed to have a season like you just did. And so a credit to them, a credit to Coach Cal. And you look at this team now, and this team is a direct reflection of the frustration of fans at this time last year and the fact that the fans would not allow a season like last year to happen again. In terms of what has actually changed, look, I spent all offseason talking about it, but one, Kentucky shook up its coaching staff. I give John Calipari a ton of credit. A lot of guys that he had been with for years, are no longer there. And some of them got other jobs and some of them got other opportunities. But one, he brought in, as I talked about all summer, we don't need to rehash it here, but two of the most well-respected recruiters in all of college basketball, Chin Coleman and Orlando Antigua, who are both working at Illinois. Orlando Antigua was, of course, a guy that was working, that worked with John Calipari during the glory years, the early part of the 2010s when Kentucky was operating at its highest level. Two, I also think, and this is a direct reflection of the fans, it was the style of play, it was the type of player that they were bringing in, and it goes back to recruiting. And again, I'm not blaming all the guys on the last staff. Part of this was on John Calipari because John Calipari has to have the final say on guys. But you start to look at some of the teams that were put together over the last couple of years, they simply weren't good enough to win the national championship. And more importantly than that, they weren't really built in a way that really, reflected that, right? And so you go back to, say, the 2018 season. They make the Sweet 16. Kentucky loses in the Sweet 16. Well, you look at the team that was on the floor that year. I think somebody that's not a Kentucky fan would say, well, they had the number one recruiting class in the country. What was so bad about that team? Well, if you look at that recruiting class, they had a bunch of guys that didn't really fit together, that didn't really play together like a team. As a matter of fact, I would actually give John Calipari credit because you look at 2019 and specifically you look at 2020 when they won the SEC. I thought that was one of his best coaching jobs because you really only had 2 or 3 guys that you could really rely on a day-to-day basis, and it was about talent and it was about development. But again, then it goes back to last year where it all completely falls apart. And so Calipari shakes up his staff. He shakes up recruiting. He goes more to the transfer portal, which I give him credit for. I know it was kind of a weird confluence of events where it just so happens that you have an older group of players that you now have access to that you had never had access to before. But at the same time, he kind of backed off the high school kids. He said, look, I love recruiting high school. I love recruiting one and done. We're the one and done school. But I didn't get a chance to see any of these kids over the last couple years. And so because of it, I need to step back. I need to change what I'm doing, and I need to focus on the transfer portal. Well, what do you have now? You have Oscar Tshiebwe, maybe the National Player of the Year. You have Severe Wheeler, probably an all-SEC point guard. You have, obviously, Kellen Grady, probably an all-SEC first-team caliber player. And it speaks to the other important thing that the fans basically bullied John Calipari into, which was changing the style of play. You go back to last year, Kentucky can't handle the ball, they can't shoot, they can't do the fundamental things that you need to win, and you see programs like Alabama at the time, like Arkansas at the time, like Gonzaga, like Baylor passing you by playing kind of a modern version of basketball, which is about shooting, scoring, spacing, whatever. Fast forward to Saturday, 11 of 18 from 3. As a team, Kentucky shoots almost 37% from 3, and again, this team looks completely different. And so look, in the bigger picture, I don't know what this all means. Don't know if Kentucky's going to win a national championship this year because I don't think anybody knows. But what I do think is I think they're one of the few teams that are in better position than most to make a deep run. I've said it all along. I've said it for the last 3, 4, 5 weeks. I don't think there is one best team in college basketball. People have been trying to tell me for a month and a half that Baylor is definitively – Baylor just lost 2 games in a row at home, okay? Don't tell me that Baylor is incredible. Don't tell me that Duke's unbeatable when they just lost to Miami. Don't tell me that whatever. So again, is Kentucky one of those teams? Yes. And it's a direct reflection of last year and John Calipari. And again, we'll see what happens in the bigger picture. I don't know if his recruiting is going to fundamentally change. I know he signed a lot of high school players this year, but I just bring it up to very simply say credit to the fans, right? Because at the end of the day, you could point to a lot of different things, but I don't think if the fans didn't put pressure on John Calipari the way that they did, if they didn't say, hey, look, we're not accepting anything other than the best from this team and this program, and we're not accepting anything other than the best from our $8 million a year head coach, I don't know if we'd be in this position. But as I said, the position right now is Kentucky's good enough to win a national championship, I believe, and I believe that's a direct reflection of their fans.